Welcome to the AMA Motorcycle Hall of Fame Museum. I'm here in the main hall, and I'm wearing these shades for a very good reason. I'm with one of the coolest motorcycles you're going to see in a very long time, a 1926 Scott. It says on the plate, 26, but even 30 years later, in 1956, this thing would have been technologically advanced. It's extremely unique for two reasons. One, it's old history, and two, it's modern history. Both are super cool. Let's take a look at them. The Scott Motorcycle Company started in 1908. There were a lot of motorcycle manufacturers at that time, but Scott went his own way. It's a two-stroke engine. Many people think that because they're simpler in operation, two-stroke engines predated four-strokes, but in fact that's not the case. Scott was one of the real pioneers of the engine type. The Scott featured a 596cc vertical twin liquid-cooled motor, seriously ahead of its time. The liquid cooling in particular was unique because it had no pump. It used a thermo-siphoning system that worked passively with hot water rising up to the radiator and coming back down of its own. It had a kickstart, which was unique back in that time. Some say that Alfred Scott even invented the kickstart. Most of his early bikes were gentlemen's expresses, designed for rich people to ride around on. But competition success was also important, and it routinely, in competition form, would beat four strokes of the same displacement. No surprise, the cylinders were firing twice as often. Scott called his first motorcycle the Squirrel. The Super Squirrel followed that, and the Flying Squirrel followed that. They had various engine layouts and componentry, some with two-speed motors, some with three. The motors were switched between gears with a set of linked clutches on a pedal. By the end of his involvement in the company, they were making a three-cylinder inline triple that was liquid-cooled, which predated the Kawasaki H3 by decades. Pretty impressive history, but that's only the start with this particular machine. The modern history of this bike is even more amazing, and it starts with a guy by the name of Kenny Howard. Now, you might not have heard of him, but you've probably heard of his nom de pinstripe plume, Von Dutch. When it comes to this bike, the Von Dutch history starts right here. This is Von Dutch's signature flying eyeball. You've probably seen it more on cars from the 1950s and 60s because he was a very popular car culture customizer. But he fell in love with this bike and added his own touches to it. He's said to have personally restored it, and all of the pinstriping and all of the markings on it were hand done by Von Dutch. So we've got a bike that's the 1926 equivalent of a GSX-R 1000. We've got a guy who rebuilt it and painted it, who was an icon of his day. Couldn't get any cooler, could it? Well, yes it could, and that's really why I'm wearing the shades. Person who owned this bike last, Steve McQueen. Doesn't get much cooler than that. Said to be one of his favorites. After his death, his estate sold it to a guy named Tony Sorensen, the same guy who revived the Von Dutch name. He's the guy that owns it now. He's the guy that loaned it to the museum here. It's just one of the bikes that we have on display. You might want to stop by, check them all out.